What is the most magical time of year for Warhammer players? I would say it is Orktober. I have a respectable 1,000-point orc army, but really I think we all know the real deal is 2,000 points. And to get that army to 2,000 points, I have an entire desk full of orc vehicles. I'm expanding the orc motorpool, and if I can get them all painted up, my games will be that much spicier. Now, to get this party started, I have one of the coolest units in the Orc Index, and that is grot tanks. These spicy little tracked vehicles come in squads of 4, toughness 6, 3-up save, 5 wounds apiece. Just on the stat line alone, they are exceptional. Add on to that the lovely orc guns, which there's quite a variety of, and Gretchen quality shooting. These guys seem absolutely phenomenal, and if my opponent decides to shoot at them with their biggest, scariest weapon, 155 points. I don't even care if they blow up, they'll have done their job. I want to get these little fellas painted quick. Me and vehicle painting doesn't usually get along, but I have some ideas of how I want to paint these up. I want to take advantage of how fun and ramshackle orc vehicles are. I prime them in black paint, and I want each of them a very different orky color. Yellow, red, blue, and black. All of these colors will change a little bit if I spray them right over the black primer, so they need a little prep. A zenithal of gray paint. Gray because I don't want the end result super bright. Orcs love colors, but keeping them dark will make them the right amount of 40k grimdark. Now for the colors. I'm imagining each tank was made by a team of Gretchen who bring their own artistic flair, and that is represented both in the different colors and different styles of these tanks. And if you're wondering where these tanks are from, then you're going to love our Patreon. For the month of October, EOB is going orky. Subscribers at the EOB terrain tier will get a set of modular orc vehicles, including goblin tanks, trucks, war rigs, and a bunch of grots perfect for chauffeuring orcs across the battlefield in style. To decorate these tanks quickly, I reached for some stencils. This one is a checkerboard stencil. You spray over it twice to get perfect checkers. I did this in as many places as I could reach on these tanks, and it's a great way to orcify anything. I also found this WAR stencil, which looks great in the bucket of the Killdozer tank. The checkers are a good start, and now I picked out some details with contrasting colors. It's fun to put myself in the headspace of a grot. What would a gobbo do? One thing I came up with is the Bad Moon's wiggly hot rod flames coming off the weapons, painting stripes on the barrels, or picking out random armor panels with colors. I've managed to turn these into Hot Wheels race cars. They look very funny, and I feel like it's appropriate for the Gretchen. Now it's time to turn these into admittedly small battle tanks through the use of weathering. Weathering on vehicles is something else. It's basically just beating the heck out of your paint job. I took a big old sponge and some metallic paint and blasted every inch of the model. This really brings out all the edges and rivets, and to get in the nooks and crannies, I used a smaller piece of foam and some forceps to get in any tight spots. Then I took some silver paint and my biggest dry brush and gave the models a good rubbin', bringing out every edge and detail. And those edges and details are extra crispy because they were printed in Tech Resin, the best quality 3D printing resin. Follow the link in the description below and use the code EonsOfBattle to get 8% off your order of Fast Navy Gray. Now the treads need to be picked out, and as long as things are getting dirty, I don't feel bad about just blasting these with my airbrush. If there's any spillage, then it just adds to the dirty effect. Now I did my chips, it's time for my dirt. Some good old-fashioned streaking grime. I didn't gloss the models, I want the streaking grime to really stick and dirty the models a lot, and anything that got way too dark I fixed with some clean mineral spirits. It's kind of a backwards way of painting. Usually I start with the big general steps and then move on to smaller careful details, but on orky vehicles it's flipped. I start out with those details and then lots and lots of layers of dirt and grime. Man, did that streaking grime do its job. These guys are grim and dark with just the right amount of silliness. Now the only thing left is to throw a little bit of dust in those treads, and my orcs are based in the Mad Max ultra vibrant yellow apocalypse wasteland, and I don't have a pigment powder that perfectly matches, but I think I know how I can make it work. I own this cream colored pigment powder. I bet I can apply this to the treads and spray a yellow over top of it. I mixed the powder with water to make a slurry, and I spread it all over the tracks. It's hard to see what this is going to do while it's still wet, so I let it dry and then took a look at it and removed some powder from spots I thought were too heavy. And now for the juice, the orange juice colored paint. Now this is an opaque ink, but thinning it 50-50 with acrylic medium and water will get it nice and transparent. I sprayed it over the tracks and it did a perfect job. Now I don't think I need any other colors of pigment except for white. And the grot tanks are ready to roll out. Oh, they're so beautiful. I am in love with these tiny little tanks, and I'm super excited to see what they do on the tabletop. I bet it's gonna be pretty good, but you know what's something that I know works well on the tabletop? That is the venerable orc truck, and that is what I'm gonna paint next. One detail I love about orc trucks is their beds. You can physically fit a model back there, and it helps me to actually remember what I decided to put inside of it while I'm gaming. These trucks are made by my boys, so I don't want to use the silly colors of the Goblin tanks, but instead some slick and shiny chrome looking vehicles. I started out with a black prime, and instead of reaching for the metallics right away, I decided to zenithal with a gray. Straight metallic paint never looks right to me, it always looks too glittery. A zenithal of gray will be what actually colors my models, and a dry brushing of silver will give me that shine and sparkle only on the raised details, the spots that would actually catch the light. I think it's much more convincing. Now back to the orky graffiti, some checkerboards. Red of course, because the red ones go faster, and picking out some of the welded designs with the same red. I like to think this is not the orcs paint, but rather they cut out some shapes from Blood Angel's rhinos. Brown over the treads, and I dry brushed on more silver to blend in my designs. I painted more black hot rod flames and black on the windows of the trucks, which, if you notice, I have the driver sticking his arm out of the windshield. Obviously, he isn't having any luck hitting anything with his big shooter, so he's trying again with his slugger. To make the window look broken, I took a nice sharp brush and I painted many small straight lines coming out of the hole, and I painted his orky hand green and his glove brown. This might be my favorite kit bash I have ever done. My orc trucks have reached the toy phase of their paint jobs where everything is base coated, and because my orcs are Mad Max orcs and they prefer their things shiny and chrome, I can skip the sponging step of weathering and move right onto the grime. I don't know about you guys, but I have a 200 pack of cheap synthetic brushes for using oils and enamels, and when I'm done, I just chuck them. I don't want to get out the mineral spirits and clean them up properly. The enamels dried pretty quick, and I did one last dry brushing of silver paint to bring back a little bit of the shininess. The orcs do their best to keep their trucks looking nice. And then it was time for more pigments. I tried adding in some red pigments over the yellow to help make the dust look more natural, especially on the bigger tracks. The orc truck might be the best transport in all of Warhammer 40k. It's a great little vehicle. 10 wounds, toughness 8 for only 60 points. This thing is dirt cheap. And even after you've gotten your boys out, you just have a truck laying around, it's a wonderful unit to just throw at your opponent and be incredibly annoying. Park it in the worst places to block movement, ram stuff randomly. I love it. But now it is time to step it up a notch and work on the big kahuna, the battle wagons. The battle wagon is an absolute monstrosity. It's toughness 10, it can be toughness 12 with Ard Case, 16 wounds, it reduces the armor penetration of anything coming at it. And of course, I have two. The orky answer to the Land Raider, the Battle Wagon, how the biggest, meanest, and coolest orcs roll around. And because they are bigger, I want to get fancier with them. One, I want to have dirty chrome like the trucks, and one, I want to have the pretty painted look of the grot tanks. I used a desaturated red, which I shaded with a darker red, and then it was time for more stencil work. I put as much checkerboarding as I could fit on this sucker, big enough for a regulation chess game. I put hazard stripes over the scoop and yellow hot rod flames over the hood. Some nice wet paint and a little wiggle of the paintbrush makes these nice and easy to pull off. On the shiny and chrome truck, I prepped it exactly like the trucks with silver paint, and while it was on my palette, I sponged it over the red wagon as well. I wanted to splash a little love to the chrome wagon, so I painted some black and white checkering over the hood, and I did some red flames on the top, finishing the treads with a little brown. I kinda like the look of the swap turrets. I think it looks better mismatched. I've painted a lot of Eldar vehicles, Space Marine vehicles, Necron vehicles, but orc vehicles feel different. In some ways, they're more artistic. I mean, you can obviously paint anything however you want, but with orcs, I feel like you have the freedom to put on anything you feel like, and because it's orcs, it's just gonna be correct. And now that these guys are all polished up and nice, it's time to make them dirty. Back to the sludge. To be a little more efficient with my supplies, I soaked up a majority of the paint with tissues, and then I used makeup sponges cut into small pieces to do the fine tuning. These models were so big that the enamel started to dry, so I used a sponge soaked in mineral spirits to do the deep cleaning. And I picked out a few spots to get extra grime. I did the treads the same way I did the trucks, and I thought it was looking a little silly with the super dusty treads next to the relatively clean metal. So I sprayed on some tan paint around them to blend them in, and then I had 2 more vehicles for the collection. And if you don't own a 3D printer, but you want to get these vehicles for your collection, you can follow the link in the description below to our store on Only Games, where you can buy these vehicles physically. I've only ever owned one orc vehicle, and that was an orc truck, and I eventually sold it to Nick. But now I have an entire fleet, and there's only one thing I can think of to make it even better. Any orc players out there remember the old rule grot riggers. It used to be a purchasable upgrade for any orc vehicle. Now it just comes on trucks, but it is essentially a Gretchen pit crew that rides on top of the trucks, repairing them in the moment. And I have some grot riggers. These Gabos are a super cute addition to our Orktober. They have all sorts of tools to help keep those Ork vehicles running. They automatically repair 1 hull point on an Ork truck a turn. I sprayed them black and then chose 3 different greens for base coating. I like my Orks to have a lot of variety in their green complexion. I zenithaled a white over top of these green base coats, and then I found all my green contrast and speed paints and I mixed up a unique blend for each grot. The white will reflect light from underneath the transparent paint layers and make for a nice bright skin. Look at this lineup of green fellas. I base coated anything that was not grot skin with a gray paint, and it took a good amount of time. Painting vehicles all day made me forget how much different characters are. I dry brushed a light gray over top of the accessories, and then a Nuln Oil wash to darken them, and then a sponging of silver. Their equipment should look pretty beaten up. After all, they're fixing vehicles that are in motion. Some watery orange acrylic paint glazed here and there made for a convincing rust, and then picking out the eyes and teeth. Now to glue these grots into place. I find gel superglue is great for this. It lets you get a better connection on uneven surfaces, and I painted up 14 grots. I wish I had 30 more to absolutely cover these vehicles and little fellas. You know, I was pretty happy with these paint jobs, but it's the grot riggers that really turn these into Ork vehicles. And speaking of Orks, it's time to go introduce these new vehicles to my Ork army. This might be a weird analogy, but you ever get a new pet and you have to introduce the new pet to the old pet and it's a little awkward? That's kind of how I felt setting up this board, but the new vehicles fit in perfectly with the Mad Max Orks. I went a little orkier on them than I was thinking about. My bikes are all just shiny and chrome with a little bit of rust thrown in there, but I wanted to do the orky flavory touches, and I still think they work perfectly. The Orks are just kind of inherently Mad Maxy. And now my boys have the not quite appropriate number of vehicles. I think they need a few more things to really round it out, but almost nothing needs to foot slog. Foot slog in Orks was very 2017. In 10th edition Warhammer, I want everything moving at maximum speed. I want to absolutely zoom up the board. I want to play ultra aggressively. And now finally having some vehicles is gonna make that dream a reality. All of these vehicles are available to our Patreon supporters at the EOB Terrain tier for the month of Orktober. Come join us and get your wog on. I absolutely love this army. It's not quite at 2,000 points yet, but soon, very soon, it'll be battle ready. Thanks for watching.